Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boomer Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today talking about the running back market in the NFL. All right, so this has been a big topic of conversation. If you follow, first of all, if you listen to me, you probably follow NFL, you know what's going on. But I've been talking about this for a while. So right now, you had Saquon Barkley, you had Josh Jacobs, and Tony Pollard, who didn't come to a long-term agreement off their franchise tag. And Tony Pollard signed his franchise tag, so he's going to play on the tag, but the other two did not, so they could sit out. They're basically just, non-NFL players right now. So they could sit out, they could sign their tag and play on the tag. This started a whole conversation between the running backs themselves, some of the top running backs complaining on Twitter, and then it started to spread. So the conversation basically is that running backs are being treated unfairly. Now, the first thing, there's a couple things that came out that caught my eye. Number one, you had Austin Eckler talking about how he is paid below or near the same the third receiver on the team. Now, I didn't look at the contract, so I don't know exactly how accurate it is, but the concept is that there's some people either on his team or others that are third option receivers making more money than him. And how is that fair when I don't think he led the team in receiving last year, but I think he might have been second. And so Eckler, he's a specific type of back, like a McCaffrey, like a Kamara that actually do a lot in the pass game. But still, that's the productivity that he brought. And so he's like, look, if you compare me to a receiver, I should be making more than a third string receiver, which I do think is fair. Then you had the whole thing going around about the average salary of a kicker and a running back. Now, that's a little misleading. Again, whenever we talk about numbers and contracts, people got to understand context. You got one kicker. Running backs, you got a starting back. You got maybe a rotational, like a two-headed monster. Then you got other running backs. So if you average the number out, is way more running backs. So the average number is going to be lower. You have a couple backs that make a lot of money that'll bump it up, but for the most part, it's a lot of running backs that don't make a lot of money, so it makes it lower. So if you did average salary of a starting running back versus a starting kicker, then we can have a conversation. I don't know what that number is. Maybe the kickers still make more, but I probably doubt it. So that's a little misleading in terms of that stat. But then we had all these other conversations too that kind of sparked this whole debate. And now everybody's been talking with it. It's the dead months. It's something to talk about, but everybody's been talking about it. And I've been talking about this for a while. And I've been meaning to jump on this for a few days, but I've just been busy. So I've said in my draft coverage, because I cover the draft primarily, if you listen to my draft, what have I said? Running backs became dime a dozen a while ago. And I'm telling you, receivers are dime a dozen and all that. Now, here's the main key. First, what do I mean by dime a dozen and what's the difference? What I mean by dime a dozen when I talk about the draft is that for Bijan Robinson to go to a bad team, let's just say a Giants X type offense, and to be outstanding and give them some production, that's going to give you a certain amount of value. Let's just say 70%. Same thing like Saquon. But let's just say that you got a team like the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs, your value is probably already 60% Patrick Mahomes in the passing game. Do you need a Bijan Robinson, a Saquon Barkley to be that much of your offense? No. So do I get a guy like that top of the round? No. Maybe end of the first round to get a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Maybe I wait to the later rounds and I get me somebody else. I was going to say that running back, but I'm Isaiah Pacheco. Maybe I get a Pacheco. And they can fill in. Maybe it's Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or maybe it's Pacheco and someone like Jared McKinnon, who was on the street, and they fill in that extra percent of the run game that I need. So depending on the team, it's a little different. But overall, the point is that if you're trying to do what the Titans do, you can't do that with any running back. Now, you look at the Cowboys, where you have hella resources invested in offensive line, maybe one of the best. Same discussion they had with Emmitt Smith. All pros all over the offensive line. Did you need to pay Emmitt Smith top dollar, or could you find somebody else to run behind that offensive line? The question is, you could find somebody else cheaper to run behind that offensive line and still get good production. I do think there's a value in the special running back, where let's just say Isaiah Pacheco, and maybe he can, but he only had 1 year, but let's just say Isaiah Pacheco. Do I believe Isaiah Pacheco could do what Derrick Henry does for the offense? No. And most people don't think a late round pick would be able to do that, because the Titans offensive line, while physical, is hurt a lot and not elite. But can I find somebody to do what Tony Pollard does behind a great offensive line like the Cowboys? Potentially. So it depends on the team. It depends on the scheme and all that. So essentially, it's the same thing with draft. It's the floor and the ceiling. Does Bijan Robinson, does Saquon Barkley, does Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, do they all have higher ceilings? Absolutely. At their peak, can they carry the team? Yes. But does every team need that? No, they don't. And so the sliding scale is very different. But the other part that people don't realize, or they do talk about it, is the longevity. So let's say receiver. Can I find somebody to give me what Tyreek Hill gives me in the later rounds? Yes, because Tyreek Hill wasn't a first round pick. He was a later round pick. So that already shows you could get receiver. You look at top 20 receivers, they're not all top 10 picks. They're not all first round picks. So you could get it in different places. So the conversation is the same as the running back. At its peak, where do I think these receivers can be? Second round receiver, they could still peak up there. Devontae Adams wasn't even a first round receiver. But the question and difference between a receiver, who I do think is a little bit dime a dozen, and a running back is that a running back shelf life ain't the same. So if I do get this receiver in the 6th round and he goes off, and he consistently goes off for 3 years, and I'm talking about a contract, guess what? He can give me 5 more years realistically at that level. But when a running back goes off consistently for 3 years, you thinking about he might give you 2 more years at that level. And so it's not just the availability, because the availability wise, tight ends are a dime a dozen, receivers are a dime a dozen, and running backs are a dime a dozen. Really, receivers are more dime a dozen because there's so many types. You could be a lot of different types of receivers and still be productive. Running backs, the same too, but for the most part, there's this, prototypical running back. You could be productive in any round that you find them. But the difference is a receiver is going to have more longevity than a running back. That's what history shows, at least. So if you don't believe in, what the market is, you're going against and hoping that your running back actually outdoes the stats and is more, has a longer longevity. So it's more than one factor. People talk about, well, you could get Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round. True, availability is one part, but longevity is the other part. So whether it be top running backs getting injured or just looking at players' careers, you got Frank Gore, he's an outlier. And a lot of these running backs before are outliers, but it's a mix of the two. People want to separate it. You can't really separate the spaghetti like that. Like, you can't get the sauce out of the spaghetti because, yes, it's longevity in terms of, like, let's just say Frank Gore and anybody else. They can play for a while. We know that. But they also played in an era where people weren't replacing running backs as fast as they are because they felt like the talent was at the top of the draft. If Frank Gore came out right now in this year, he's a rookie. And we know that he has the longevity to play for 15 years. He would never get that chance because people are looking to replace expensive running backs quicker. So it's a combination of availability that has changed with the draft, and it's a combination of the longevity of the player. So even if you can be like, let's say Saquon, workout warrior, let's just say he's got 10 more years in him, and we know that for a fact. That doesn't guarantee that he's going to stay on because somebody's looking to pay somebody cheaper. So there's all that. I think number one, what the teams are saying is factual. The teams are saying with their wallet that it makes more sense in this current structure to not give you what you want, especially big money deals after certain years. Now they got you for 4 years, 5 years if you're a first round pick. And then they got franchise tags, so they could wait out a running back. The question isn't about the value of the running back. A lot of people saying passing league, and if you listen to me, I say it's a false narrative. It's been a false narrative. This ain't a passing league the way people try to say. It's passing up and different. Absolutely. Rules help that. Philosophy helps that. But if you look at the numbers, if you want to go straight numbers, the rushing is not off a cliff like people will have you believe. Does an individual rusher look different? Yes. Derrick Henry, not Christian McCaffrey. Who am I thinking of? Josh Jacobs. Yes, they might look kind of similar, but if you look at the league as a whole in terms of the running game, not a running back individually, the running game is very much a part of the league and very big. And it has not fell off like people try to say, even in the last 5 years. But if you talk about philosophically and just looking at the game, the running game can never be eliminated. Like, you can say, Derrick Henry could say, get rid of running backs, and people say that it's going to be flag football. It's not, because the running game schematically helps so much. It's simple. Honestly, at the end of the day, it's simple math. Simple math and physics that dominates football as much as people think and talk about it. Physics is the whole technique and all that different stuff. But the math of it is you have a finite amount of time, you have a finite amount of space, and you have a finite amount of options. Not having a running game eliminates a lot of the options. So there is no decision where we don't run the ball. Like, people talk about Pacheco. I think he ended up like a little over 7 or something like that, 100 yards. Like, that's nothing. That's a lot of yards. Plus what other people did. And Chiefs are, one of the heaviest passing teams. So you got to think about the rest of the league that are more average. They're running even more than them. The run game is always going to be important. What isn't being valued is the individual running back who's doing it. And again, that goes back to the discussion. Does Derrick Henry at his peak give you something different than Isaiah Pacheco? And I hate to keep picking on him, but Michael Carter, or who else got drafted? Gibbs from Alabama. Like, do the special backs give you something different at their peak? Yes. But do you need them at their peak is the question. Can we have an effective run game in Atlanta with Mariota on quarterback runs, and then Aguilera, and then also Patterson and other running backs? Can we still have an effective run game So if your run game consists of 2 or 3 people and you want to spread the money out, like I said, it makes sense. I'm not saying it doesn't, but that the thought that the run game isn't valuable, it's a pass league, is false. Now, the real discussion that nobody's having is what to do as far as the structure. Look, as a union, you're supposed to look out for the best interests of the members. And that, obviously, we know that goes in everything. And so when it comes to football and people talking about, well, it should all be the same. No, you got to do what's right for the situation. So in this situation, that's like saying quarterbacks are treated the same as everybody. No, they're not. So it's fair that positions are looked at differently. The same way that a franchise tag is not X number for every player. No, it's X percent or average of the top salaries at that position. And so positions are unique and specific. So the real answer is that one of two things. You have to set it up where the running backs either get more money up front coming in as a rookie, or that they get to sign for less time. Because those are the two big things. Like if Saquon Barkley had to play this year on 1 year for $80 million, guaranteed he'd be playing. Guaranteed he would be playing. Because that's way more money than he gonna get guaranteed in a 10-year contract. So it's about what money you are guaranteed and upfront getting. Secondly, if you come out and you only have a 2-year contract and you go off your rookie year, well, that next year they got to make a decision or you get to walk. It's the same philosophy Dak Prescott had. I want a good contract, but I want it to be short so that I have more time on my clock to make another contract. So in terms of what the solution is negotiating, those are the two things. Now, the NFLPA is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Won't do what it takes. But if they were doing their job, that's what you would be focused on, is the structure of these contracts. Not necessarily, because it's easy to say, okay, the Giants need to pay Saquon because he did X, Y, Z. Well, then everybody has a bunch of retaliations loaded up. And their retaliations make sense. It's all the stuff we talked about. It doesn't make any sense or logic for these teams to do that. But that shouldn't be the conversation. The conversation shouldn't be, hey, teams just do it. The conversation should be, we got to re-look at the structure. And if you are the NFLPA, two big things should be on your mind. Separate quarterback salary caps and then restructuring the running backs. Like, why not? Each position has unique needs and benefits. So I don't want to hear it's not fair. It's got to be the same across the board. Nothing's the same across the board. So the NFLPA is pretty weak and they're not going to do it. But that's the real conversation that should be happening. Because this whole, it's a passing league, running backs are devalued. That's not true. That's a mislead. The real truth of it, like I said, is the running game is very valuable. The individual running back themselves might not be valuable to some of these teams in terms of cost. I mean, you look at a guy like Dalvin Cook, that's a game breaker, and they just let him go. So a lot of people like talk collusion because it's sexy to say. I will say in basic terms it is, but not in the way that everybody claims it. It's not necessarily everybody got together to do it, but that's the market. So some people will be like, running backs sucks for you. That's the market. Well, guess what? They could start just not paying quarterbacks crap. They could be like, you know what, Herbert, we're not giving you a lot of money. Burrow, we're not giving you a lot of money. Why is the only reason they don't do that? Because they know other teams will pay them. So the only way you feel comfortable cheaping out a Saquon or Josh is knowing that other teams won't do it. The only reason you feel comfortable cutting the Dalvin Cook because you know other teams won't do it. And I'm not saying collusion as in they called each other and decided to do it, but everybody watches the market and they jump on the wave. There's no owner or GM that wouldn't love for the wave to become, okay, these quarterbacks, we not going to pay them. The only reason people are scared to death of letting a Kyler Murray go when he didn't prove none is because they think somebody else going to pay him. And so in very, very basic terms, yeah, it's kind of collusion because the teams are together and deciding the market. So when you say sucks for you running backs, that's the market. That could be the market for anybody if all the teams do the same thing. So I don't think that's really the discussion. Like I said, I think the structure of the contracts is something you talk about. Because look, if you imagine a world, I'll just throw this out there. If you imagine a world with all rookie contracts with 2 years, just imagine how much more money would be flowing to the players. The reason that much money doesn't flow to the players because teams got them under control for X amount of years. So you have a free agency class where you like, oh man, this receiver and that cornerback are all due. If rookie contracts was only 2 years, it'd be happening all the time, be new money all the time. And that's what they don't want. They want you living off old money. They do not want to give out new money. So again, the NFLPA not gonna do it because they're not strong enough. But that's the real conversation there. So that's it for me as far as the talks about running back and everything. The running game is still valuable. Top fledged running backs are still valuable. It's just a combination of different things right now. So go down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and remember, thank you for listening.